Hey everybody, welcome to this week's community gathering video. My name is Pierce Love, the student pastor here at the 456, and I'm so happy that you guys are joining us to dive in further to what we talked about this past Sunday. Now, what we talked about past Sunday, I'll give you point number one right out the gate. Point number one was Jesus brings good news to the poor and proclaims freedom to the captives. And that's one thing that we looked about, where Jesus goes into the synagogue in Capernaum and he actually he goes up to the front. He's handed the scroll of Isaiah, and he reads from Isaiah chapter 61, where he reads this prophecy concerning him. And in the midst of that, it talks about that he is the one who is anointed by the Spirit of God to bring good news to the poor and proclaim freedom to the captives. We talked about how there's this nature with Jesus where there's this truth about Jesus where in his ministry on earth he fulfills these certain prophecies, where he does these certain things, where he does proclaim good news to the poor here on earth, where he proclaims freedom to the captives while he was here on earth during his ministry. But also this prophecy kind of goes full force and continues on, right? Where he is still one who is proclaiming good news to the poor and proclaiming freedom to the captives. And we talked about that in the midst of point number two, but we'll get there later. That's point number two. We're in point number one right now. Point number one, we talked about all these different stories in Luke where Jesus is putting this prophecy into action, putting the fulfillment of this prophecy into action. We talked about Jesus healing the man with leprosy and how he touched the man, and how this man with leprosy, he was considered poor because he was someone who is a outcast. And that's what the prophecy in Isaiah is really kind of hinting at and pointing to as well, is the language there isn't just financially poor, how we might think about the word poor today, but poor including those who are social outcasts, those who are financially poor, those who are different than other people, who are cast out, and it may be because of that. And the man with leprosy, he definitely fits that mold, because leprosy, nobody wanted to touch that. Nobody wanted to get that disease. Nobody wanted to interact with those people, but rather Jesus in his ministry, in his proclaiming this good news, in him bringing healing to this man, he touched him. And we see a very similar instance with Matthew, with the calling of Matthew, the calling of Levi as a follower of Jesus, as one of the 12 disciples. When Jesus calls him, he is sitting in his tax collector booth. He's a tax collector. Tax collectors are very much social outcasts because they are people who are kind of turning their back on their Jewish brothers and sisters to fulfill or to live out and work in this Roman authoritative role. And so, but they're not really Roman and they're not really Jewish, because they are manipulating and causing hurt to their own people by enacting this authority and probably kind of skimming some stuff off the top as well, kind of stealing from their co-Jewish people. And so tax collectors are very much a big no-no. People are avoiding them. I like to think about it. I think my example on Sunday was kind of like a mall kiosk, where it's kind of like, you're like, well, I don't really want to get my shoes polished right now, or I don't really want to massage right now. So you're kind of looking down. You're kind of just I'm just trying to get to JCPenney's to get those slacks on sale. That's what I need. And so you're just trying to not just kind of avoid eye contact, look around and not look directly at the person. But Jesus looked at him. Jesus looked at him. And he said, follow after me. And Levi did. Matthew did. Matthew followed after him. We talked about Jesus healing the centurion slave and how the centurion wasn't a Jewish man, but rather he was an outsider because he was a Gentile. He wasn't Jewish, but yet Jesus even said, well, I haven't even seen this type of faith in Israel. Of course your slave is healed. And then we see this man, the naked, demon-possessed man who lives in the tombs. The naked, demon-possessed man who lives in the tombs. If there is a poster child for social outcasts, it is a naked, demon-possessed man who lives in the tombs. They talked about this man in the sense that they would even chained him up so that he wouldn't bother anybody or go insane, but he would still break the chains and go roam throughout the desert. That's how they talked about this man. And Jesus interacted with this man and freed him from the demons that were possessing him. When this man said, hey, let me follow after you, let me go with you guys, Jesus says, no, you got to proclaim these things that have happened. So Jesus, in all of these different instances, and this is not a complete compilation of all the times where Jesus has done these things, but in all of these instances, Jesus is very much proclaiming good news to the poor and freedom to the captives. That prophecy also says recovery of sight to the blind and freedom to those who are oppressed. And that heartbeat, that fulfillment of this very much flows into these stories and so many other stories that I wish we had time to go through, but we just couldn't. And these I touched on because we see these different facets of these people being poor, these people being outcasts, these people being ones who aren't of the norm. We see with the man with leprosy, we see that he is physically, we see he is a physical outcast. We see with Matthew, with Levi, he's an economic outcast, or because of his profession, he's an outcast. We see the centurion by his race and by socially, he would be considered an outcast. By this naked demon-possessed man, he is spiritually an outcast. And so there's all these different facets of outcasts and poor and captives that he frees, or he brings freedom to, and he proclaims good news to. And our point number two was that this prophecy, this fulfillment of this prophecy, it includes us. That Jesus shows through his ministry, through his time on earth, that he is one who reaches out to the downtrodden, who reaches out to the poor, who proclaims freedom to the captives and proclaims freedom to the oppressed. We talked about even Paul. Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians how God chose the stupid and chose the outcast and chose the dumb and chose all these things to show that he is wise, to show that he is good, to show that he is strong. In the midst of their dumbness, in the midst of their weakness, he is better than that. And so Jesus is reaching out to those who are weak so that he can show his strength. And we see this throughout his entire ministry. And one thing that I think is so absolutely beautiful about this is it brings new light to the fact that Jesus is God among men. You see, a lot of times when we think about God among men, we think about God coming to the rich, God coming to the scholarly, God coming to those who are of higher status, because God is of higher status. So therefore, why would he want to hang out with the poor? Why would he want to hang out with the dumb? Why would he want to hang out with the weak? Why would he want to hang out with the sick? Why would he want to do any of those things? He would want to hang out with those of the proper stature, right? And that's a lot of the times the way that we even subconsciously and a lot of times the forefront of our minds think about God. And we think, you know what, I'll follow after Jesus after I can get my stuff together because, you know, my tie's got to look good and my life's got to look in order and my family's got to be okay and I got to have that perfect promotion so that I can, impress Jesus. It's weird because when we actually put it on paper, it doesn't make any sense, but there is so many actions in our life that we do to try to prove ourselves to Jesus, to try to impress Jesus, to try to say, you know what, yeah, we're trying to be the perfect candidate, like we got to interview, but no, Jesus is the one who reached out to us. We didn't have to prove anything or do anything for him, but Jesus is the one who reached out to us. And what I love about these stories is that we can see it in black and white, how Jesus did that. And how beautiful and how magnificent it is that we serve a God who touched a leper, who served a God who looked at a tax collector, we serve a God who goes to the man who is demon-possessed in the tombs. We serve a God who even saves those outside of his race, outside of his people. You see, we didn't have to do anything. Jesus reached out to us. Jesus reached out to them. Jesus interacted with them when no one else would. And we have a God who interacts with us because we are incapable of healing ourselves, incapable of saving ourselves, incapable of bringing about this freedom. And you know what? We are the poor who have had good news proclaimed to us that Jesus is all of these things for us. Jesus is Savior. Jesus has shown grace and love and compassion to those of us who very deeply and desperately needed him. And that brought us to our prayer. Jesus, we praise you for bringing good news and freedom. And may that praise resound in our hearts and on our lips and in our minds as we go through day in and day out of life. Jesus, we praise you. We praise you for the good news that you bring and the freedom that you proclaim. We've got 3 questions for you guys as we kind of wrap up this video. Question number 1 isn't a question, it's just a prompt. Question number 1 says, name a time you felt like an outcast. There's a lot of situations in life where we feel like we don't belong. What's one of those for you? There's plenty of instances for me. There's a lot of times where I've been specifically kind of in church environments where I just feel like the guy that doesn't belong. I had either long hair or a hat or people knew that I was in hardcore bands. There's a lot of those instances where I felt like I had to kind of dumb down my own likes and my own personality because I didn't fit this stereotypical American Baptist model of life. And so I felt like an outcast in a lot of those type of situations. What's something for you? It could be a job. It could be church like me. It could be a job. It could be stuff even with family things. Just you don't fit the mold of your family maybe. And so you feel like an outcast there. What is that for you? And what's that like? I mean, name that and talk about that if you feel open to it here in your community gathering. Question number 2, is there a story about Jesus that particularly brings this truth or Jesus fulfilling this prophecy? It brings it home for you. I know for me, just really the realization of Jesus like touching the leper. I don't know. There's something about that where it's just the level of compassion and disregard for societal rules. I love that. What is it for you? It doesn't have to be one of the 4 we talked about today. It could be any story that you know about Jesus where you see that he is one who proclaims good news to the poor, brings good news to the poor, and proclaims freedom. Question number 3, what's it like having the God of the universe reach out to you? And have you in the past, or do you currently have anything standing in the way of accepting that reality? I know in the past, for me, a lot of the time stepping in the way of Jesus and God reaching out to me and accepting that truth, a lot of it just had to do with kind of residual frustrations and lust and pride that were in my life. There was different things throughout college specifically that I felt like I needed to get a handle on, and I could not believe that Jesus would save a man like me. And I had to get all these things in check to really kind of accept that and live that out. And let me tell you, it held me back for so long. And I wish that I would have just embraced the freedom that Jesus has brought into my life, and how beautiful it is that God has reached down and pulled us out of the muck, out of the mire, out of the mud, out of the garbage pile, out of the heap, whatever you want to say, that has pulled us out of the dump and cleaned us out and made us his own. And that is so unbelievably beautiful because we were so far gone. But Jesus and his grace and his power has brought good news and saved us and brought freedom. Let's praise Jesus for that. I hope you have a great week. I hope you enjoy your time with your community gathering. And if you're not able to meet up with one this week and you're just watching this, maybe on your commute, as Ryan likes to bring up, on your way to work or from work, or if you're just watching it at home and you're thinking about these questions, thank you so much for diving in. We love you guys so much. We pray that you have a great week and come back for us next week. And yeah, have a good one. Bye.